You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode. Before we get started on this episode, here's a not so short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster or the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak with a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's courses on Udemy or Skillshare, and you can find out more about those at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley, and we have my wife, Cassandra. It's almost Christmas.
I know, almost.
A couple days.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's going to be your birthday month.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Let's get through Christmas and New Year's.
For our listeners, Cassandra likes to celebrate the entire month of January.
All January long.
And do you do that because your birthday's right in the middle?
No, if it was the first, I'd celebrate all month long too.
Maybe you'd have to celebrate December too.
Yeah, I was actually due on January 1st, so I came 15 days late. So see, I celebrate all month long.
That's great. So today's topic, I get asked this all the time, but how much is toxic mold remediation? Do you know when I say that?
Well, I know people complain that it's a lot, that it's a lot of money. And the moment people hear they might have a mold problem, they start to panic because of the cost.
Yeah, which if you're panicking and this is your first time listening, reach out. Like, we offer services, consultations, scope of work. Reach out. I can't convince you, but I'll try to convince you that it's not the end of the world. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but yes, it is very expensive.
So are a lot of things.
As you say all the time, what's your health worth?
Yeah, but I also think if we actually, everybody took a look at what they actually spend money on, we were just having a discussion about streaming services.
Yes.
And how much we actually spend on streaming services.
On top of Dish and everything
exactly.
else.
And so when people really look at where they put their money, we could actually afford a lot more of what is actually the priority if we reduce the expenses that are not the priority, but that we have on auto pay or that we just pay every month.
Exactly. And it brings up something you talk about all the time. For our listeners, if you have young children, we've had young children, we understand they like to splash and make messes and do things. But if you have young children that chronically, routinely are always splashing in water everywhere, maybe your spouse is really, I'm not sure the verbiage I want to use, but makes a mess when they're, either bathing or when they're doing the dishes. If you can try to change those habits a little bit, it'll save you from mold remediation.
That's true.
And the reason I bring it up is every time we talk about people and their habits, like a lot of times what people are doing is going to lead to mold remediation or things they're not doing, like paying attention to the humidity in the home.
But I think that's one of the reasons to really upfront, before you ever have a mold issue, know the cost of mold mitigation, because it will make you pay attention to your habits a lot more, knowing that you don't want to incur an expense. I mean, I think sometimes I think people who don't know anything about mold, when they get a mold issue, they're like, oh, this will be like $1,000, maybe $2,000. And then they learn that no, actually $5,000 is a very cheap price. $20,000, $30,000 is kind of average depending on the severity. And mean, so I think when you know in advance just how much it could end up costing you, and that's not even all the testing. I mean, you've seen people pay thousands for testing alone.
I've seen people pay almost $20,000 in testing.
Yep.
Which to me is insane. But, to kind of go back to the initial question, how much does it cost? Well, and I've talked about this previously in the podcast. Let's say, for our listener, let's say they have some mold in just one bathroom, and that's all we have to address. We still have to put floor protection down. We still have to establish containments. We still have a 48-hour cool down period while our air scrubbers are running. So that one little area, for the most part, is for sure at least a 4 to 5 day job. Now, 2 of those days were not on site. But my point is even for something simple, it takes us sometimes longer to set up our containments than it does to do the remediation.
And so then how much would you say at minimum people are thinking of the average mold job they should expect to pay?
At least $5,000.
So at least $5,000.
I know for our company, you're not going to get me on site with all of our equipment and tools to do anything for probably less than $5,000. And like I said, it's not that I'm price gouging you, but there are processes and we have protocols that we follow because we do mold remediation to IICRC S520 standards. It's a minimum of at least 3 or 4 days on site.
Absolutely. And I think this is worth mentioning. You've had a number of clients who've listened to the podcast who've said, I would like you to come out of state to where I am to do mold remediation. That at least $5,000 then gets, if you're traveling to them, the out-of-state fees associated with that.
Yeah. And, if they want us to do it, or me and our company, they're going to have to pay for mileage. They're going to have to pay for lodging. It's, we board our dogs. Like, there's things that we have to do. And for the most part, you always come with because you're lucky enough that you can work no matter where you're at. But for our listeners, it's not outrageously priced, but you are going to pay. Let's just say we have to drive to Colorado. It's probably going to cost you $10,000, but I'm going to be on site for a minimum 3 or 4 days.
Well, and when you're saying people should expect to pay at least $5,000 for mold remediation, at least.
That's local.
That's local, and it doesn't include putting sheetrock back and flooring back, right?
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. We do not rehab.
Okay.
Meaning we don't reinstall anything.
So then that's a whole other cost with somebody else, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and we don't do like the restoration companies do. They do all of it. Mm-hmm. And most of the time they're subbing things out, but we don't do that.
Okay.
When we leave the job site, you still have to rehab it, put sheetrock insulation, all of that back up. And that's not that expensive.
No, but I think that's just important to know because people will hear at least $5,000 and will think, oh, that's for everything. That's for the mold testing initially. That's for the rehabbing. That's for the mold mitigation. No, that's just for the mitigation, correct?
Yep. And I'm not price gouging people. Like when I do our proposals or estimates, the hourly rate, I'm not going to say, on the podcast what it is, but it's a very reasonable price. Mm-hmm. Like we're not charging $500 an hour. But on the other hand, for someone like myself, and I'm sure our listeners know this, you can hire the cheapest company if you want.
And you're
going to get the cheapest work.
Yep, you get what you pay for. Now, there are a lot of people who are going to say, okay, this is going to be a lot of money. I need to handle this mold situation. Will my home insurance cover this?
The easiest answer is no.
Oh.
But does that mean they for sure won't? No. I've had a client this year that they covered $10,000 of it. They more or less covered the entire amount. Mm-hmm. I had another client, they only covered $5,000. I've had other clients, they don't pay anything. So the easy answer to that is, I have no idea, but get a company that will work with you and help you get you through that insurance process. But keep in mind, a lot of our competitors, which are restoration companies, they're going to tell you, and you're going to sign the paperwork, you just unknowingly are signing it. They're going to tell you, yeah, insurance will cover it, we'll do everything we can. But you're signing on the dotted line that if insurance doesn't cover it, then you have to pay it.
What about in the case of renters? I know that lots of renters in the forums on Facebook, their feedback pushback is, well, I'm a renter, so my landlord should have to pay for it. How does that work?
That is, and we've done podcast episodes about renters, but for the most part, the easiest way to answer that is you cannot force your landlord to do what you want them to do. And yeah, there are laws in different states that protect the renters, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to go down that road.
Okay.
So as a renter, I'm not saying your landlord's a slumlord, but it's very difficult for you to force them if you're the renter.
Okay. I think that's important to know.
Yeah. And, once again, like, even as a renter, let's say you carry renter's insurance, that doesn't cover anything on the home side of things. Mm-hmm. It might cover, and I say might, cover your belongings. But if you call your renter's insurance carrier and you say, we have a mold issue and this, and this needs to be thrown away, as soon as you say mold, they're probably going to say we don't cover it. But my point is renter's insurance does not cover any repairs on a place you're renting. It only covers your personal belongings.
Okay.
And every policy's written differently, but just for our listeners, like, when it comes down to the insurance road, whether you're the homeowner or a renter, it's a very difficult road to get them to pay.
Okay, that's good to know. What if somebody's saying, well, okay, 5,000 is a lot, 10,000 is a lot, 20,000 is a lot, 30,000 is a lot. Do I have to pay all of this up front? What's your response to that?
For all of it, I would say that's a red flag.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you should expect to pay a certain percentage. And, depending on the amount, the location, or whatnot, for the most part, I usually require 50%.
Yep.
Now, if you're here locally, we can negotiate and it could be less. But the easy answer to your question is, and this is nothing personal. It's not a trust issue. I've just done this long enough. You can't get me to show up without any money down.
Correct.
I have to buy materials. I have to pay for fuel. If it's out of town, I have lodging. I have my laborers' costs, depending on how many laborers we need. So as you asked, is it normal to have to pay up front? It is.
Okay.
But you should not. And I would not recommend you pay 100% up front.
Okay.
That's a risky thing.
Absolutely. So you talked about that the fact that people can expect at minimum to pay at least $5,000. What have you seen on the upper end of the mold remediation price tag?
We've done projects over $50,000. So
okay.
That's not uncommon.
And that doesn't include, as you said, the rehab, but it certainly doesn't include all the medical stuff people might do.
No.
Okay.
No. And once again, this is the thing about mold. It's so complex. Like, every situation's different. Everybody listening and all my clients have different levels of income, but it's hard to just say, you shouldn't be paying more than $30,000. Well, it depends on what that entails. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So what's your call to action for people?
If we kind of talked about this in the last episode, but for our listeners, we talked about hiring the proper professional. If you're going to have any mold services, whether it's inspections or not, we have an email opt-in, mm-hmm. and it's called How to Hire the Right Mold Pro, correct?
Yeah. I think that is it exactly.
You would think we know.
It's on the website, but there's also the mold investigation checklist. That's a good place to start.
Is the Hiring the Right Mold Pro on the website? I think it's
in the books.
Yeah. I can't remember for sure. And for our listeners, we have different email opt-ins. There is one or two of them on the site.
Yes, the mold fact sheet and the mold investigation checklist. And I would say start with the mold investigation checklist, especially if you think you need mold remediation.
Yeah.
Begin by doing that mold investigation checklist.
Yeah. And for our listeners, those that have run their own businesses, like, an email list is very important. So for you to get that checklist, and sometimes I'll just email it to people, but for our listeners, you need to sign up and give us your email address. We're not selling it to anybody. We're not going to send you an email every day. Matter of fact, you typically are not going to get more than 2 a month. And my point is we're not going to blow up your email. But in exchange for free information, you're going to be on our email list.
Well, and here's the thing about the email list. If you want to hear from Steve the latest things that are changing when it comes to mold, the latest products that he's releasing. I mean, we have the mycotoxin prevention kit, which is a digital bundle, but there will be many more bundles to come. There will be more books that will be written and published. There will be courses. There will be different things and sales on the virtual property assessment, the mold consult sessions. I mean, there's just so much that CNC offers. You're not going to see those discounts anywhere other than the email list.
Exactly.
So you want to be on the email list to be the first to know.
Yeah. And we hope they don't, but they can easily unsubscribe, right?
Yes, you can easily unsubscribe, but I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, wow, Steve is teaching me a lot, make sure you're on the email list.
Exactly.
You'll learn even more.
Yeah, and I guess my point is for our listeners, like, if you don't want to get information from me down the road, you can always unsubscribe. It's not an act of Congress to get that done.
No, but when you're facing paying $50,000 to $60,000 for mold remediation, if an email could have saved you that money, well worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate all of you. Christmas is in 2 days. So for those that celebrate, have a Merry Christmas. For those that don't, Happy Holidays. And the New Year's just around the corner.
Yes, it is. Happy holidays.
All right. Thank you to all of you. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you go to our website at cnccontractorservices.com and sign up for the mold investigation checklist. Again, go to cnccontractorservices.com and get your free mold investigation checklist today. You can also on cnccontractorservices.com find out more about Steve's courses and books and consultations. Once again, go to cnccontractorservices.com.